Okay, we talked about cleaning this part of the stator, and I'm using 1200. I actually have 1200 grit. This is the finest I can get here. If I could get 2,000 or 3,000, I would probably start with 1200 and then work to 3,000, but this is all I can get. And this is nothing other than trying to go in the direction, and what you're doing is cleaning off the carbon that's on it, and as well as smoothing out any scratches. So that's really all there is to this. I'll carry on and let you guys see what it looks like when I'm done. All right. Bring this guy back into play. I did some cleaning on this guy. You can see there's still some grooves in there, but I'll show you my sandpaper. I was starting to remove a little bit more copper than I wanted to, so I got it reasonably cleaned up. I didn't want to wear that any more than I have to, because brushes are easier to replace than this piece, I would imagine. So now we're going to put our housing back on. Definitely looks like there's a side to this, since the magnets are closer to one side than the other. So because I'm going here to here, looking at my magnets, I'm going to say the longer space is going to go to the outside, because there's more space from here to here than there is from here to there. So be careful, because this is pretty strong and this will pinch your hands. There we go. And there we were lining up our little tang right there. So now we're ready to put our brush assembly back in. One thing I learned yesterday in doing this was that, if you remember, our wires pass through two holes. They're right here. There are only two holes, and that's where they go. Even though these look like they would do that, they don't. Just these two. So when we're putting our brush assembly back in, we want to position it so that our wires are close. Our wires here are close to these two holes. Okay. Hopefully you can see that. So now we're going to go in. We're going to line that up with our bearings and slide this down gently. And this is where that wire really helped out well, because this pipe is not quite wide enough, but that wire was perfect. But anyway, we got it in. So there we are. So now we're good to go. Our little retaining rings pop loose. This one actually stayed in place. If you remember from some of the other videos, this always came out, but in this one it stayed in place. I was surprised. I really don't. So I'm going to hold that right there, and I'm going to go I'm using this back of a screwdriver because it's light and it's plastic, and hopefully won't damage the end of this ring. Okay, we're making progress. Okay. Now we put our dust cover back on. Wires through the little square hole. That soldering iron, by the way, was being powered by our inverter, connected directly to batteries being charged by solar panels, as we are off-grid and completely 100% solar powered. Okay, now And we can put our bolts back in. One thing with these particular bolts, they get kind of tricky because as they go down, the magnets want to pull on them. And they don't always line up with their threads at the other end. They will feel like they are, but they're not. So you got to really kind of test it. But like I say, the magnets start pulling on them, pulling on the end as it gets down there, and it gets kind of hard to. There we go. That's just become a feel thing over the years. But hopefully I won't see this pump for a while. Hopefully she's good to go. Tight. Okay, now we can put her back together. First thing we want to do before we get too excited and too far is we want to make sure that for whatever reason a brush didn't get in a bind with the spring. We want to make sure that it's making connection all the way through. And we are, so that saves us from having to, and hopefully you guys could hear that. That was my meter on the continuity setting buzzing at a pretty high frequency. Not sure if the phone picks that up. Okay, in putting these pieces back together, they call this the canister. Inside the canister, I'm not sure if you can see that, there is an indentation. I'm going to do it maybe this way. There's an indentation right here. Yeah, there you can see it. So that's where your wires set in. So as you see the wires are on the side of the pump like this, and that indentation allows for space for that. So we're going to push our wires into our little holes. And at this point, it doesn't really matter which hole these go into, because when they get up top, they're going to have some freedom of movement. One thing I've learned here is that even though you have a good amount of lead here that you can push up to get space to work with, if you have too much, if you pull it out too far, so it's nice and easy to work with, this becomes a problem as you go to push it back in. Because it doesn't want to go. So my advice here is to use as little as you think you're going to need, and then you'll see what I'm saying here once we get going. And make sure it's not in a bind, make sure it's got some travel, because that becomes an issue a little bit later. Okay. So now we're going to slide this back in, paying attention to our little groove or notch that's in the canister. And we're going to set her back down. Obviously this hole's lining up with this. And there she is. And that's it. That didn't take a lot of force. Not a whole lot of twisting, just straight down. Don't want to twist too much because again those wires are laying in that channel. And at this point we start putting things back together. This has a flat edge on it. This flat edge goes up against the edge here. So if you remember, our red wire was on the right. Again, I don't want to pull it out too much because then it's going to be hard getting it back in the hole. So get my wires both up there. I come to my trusty small size Allen wrench. I think they call it 5/64. Again, on the tool, it's got a bunch of sizes, but on the wrench themselves it doesn't. So I'm sure somewhere there's an Allen wrench with a size stamped into it. But at Allen wrench is small, don't know if you'd ever see it. So here, now we're going to push this down, and as you can see, if you would have had a bunch of wire, that just creates a problem for you. Just using our fingers to push that down in. There we go. Now we're going to do our output connector. Again, just slide it straight down. And now we're ready to put our screen on, lining up the holes here with the Allens here. It just slides down. At this point, you can either put the Allens in the side in or continue with the top. In this case, I'm going to do the top. You see you have two holes. One's a little bit bigger than the other. And it also has a flat edge. That flat edge corresponds to your electrical connections here. It also, there's two places here and one there, so it's kind of hard to get this wrong. And pull that straight down. Now we're ready for our top screws and our side Allens, and then we can test it and see if she's spinning. We'll test to see that the motor's spinning first, and then we'll move on to make sure that it's pumping water before we go downhill and put her in the well. The well is about a quarter mile away. Downhill, give or take somewhere between 70 and 100 meters. This is the first pump of 3 that we use to bring water up to the house. This it's down in a well, we'll call it 30 meters, even though the pump itself is probably submerged only about 6 to 10 meters down into the water, especially during the dry season. But you know, before the pipe or the water ever starts coming up to the house, it's got to get out of the well 30 meters and then pump it another 1/8 of a mile uphill about 30 meters to our, we'll call it a substation or a transfer station, where it puts water into a tank. And then from that tank we go through another pump, which we have shown some repairs on, and it pumps it up to yet another pump, or excuse me, yet another tank, another substation. We used to only have one substation, but we've elected to go with 2 smaller pumps versus 1 larger pump, just because they were easier to get. In a future video here in about a week or so, I'm going to do a comparison to show you a company called Shurflo, which is a Chinese knockoff of the Shurflo products, and show you the differences. We elected to buy one of those a few years ago because one of our pumps went down and we couldn't get parts. So we tried the Chinese version, and it turned out kind of as expected, really, but I'll show you some comparisons. All in all, I would rather have 1 Shurflo pump than 10 Shurflo pumps, because you will need the 10 to get you through the same amount of time. It's nowhere near the same quality of build, not even close. But we'll do that here in a week or so. So you know, click the subscribe button and the little notifications so you can see when that comes out. Okay, we're going to line that up, our screen. We're going to set our little Allen screws in. I'm sure these things have some special name. Not sure why they couldn't have a Phillips head, but. And let's see, we have our special tool. Since I didn't have an Allen, I had to rig up something that would fit in there. And I was very fortunate to happen to have everything I needed in order to do this. Nothing like having a maintenance need and not having the tools that you need. But I would trust that for any of you guys that are looking to live off grid, that you have, one, the courage to learn and adapt. Number two, some experience, some kind of hands-on experience in fixing things and maintaining things. I'm learning all the time. I've learned a lot over the years, but still learning. So now we've got everything back together, and we'll give her a test.